Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Oh, really? What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule 1 drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
All right, welcome everybody. Time for Toker Talk Radio. So glad to have you here. You're watching TV earlier today? I know I was. I was glued to the testimony of Jefferson Beauregard Jeff Beau 3 Sessions. A guy not only named after two traitors to America, but the third such iteration of a man named after two traitors to America. The Sling Blade Hobbit, as I like to call him, Keebler Gump, etc. This guy was on the dais today testifying in front of senators, and it was just amazing to watch. Like, just take out the political aspects of it. Whenever there was a Democrat asking a question, Sessions, oh my goodness gosh, I don't recall if I had any such thing or conversation, but if I did have such a conversation, well, golly, I'm sure there'd have been nothing wrong with the conversation that I had that I really don't recall if I had. Right? Filibuster, slow Southern drawl, can't recall a damn thing. Except that he can recall that of the stuff he can't recall, it had to be good. Couldn't have been anything he did wrong. But boy, Republicans came to answer the question. It's like, well, sir, I don't remember. Well, sir, yes, sir. Well, sir, no, sir. No, yes, sir. No, sir. Boom, nice and snappy when the Republicans are answering questions. And man, how about the treatment of Senator Harris from California? And I always mispronounce her first name, so I'm not going to try and say it. Where she was getting reprimanded by the chairman for trying to get past Sling Blade Hobbit's obvious filibustering. Obvious, like, I'm just going to draw this out because I know you've only got 5 minutes to talk to me. So if I say some really long, rambling, meandering nonsense, you won't have the time to ask me a whole bunch of questions. So on and on, right? And so a lot of the Democratic senators, my senator, Senator Wyden, was one of the most forceful. A lot of the Democratic senators are like, all right, yeah, cut that off, answer this question. Cut that off, and, basically trying to get him to quit filibustering. Senator Harris does the same damn thing, and she gets reprimanded by the chair and gets shut down and interrupted by other senators. Again, she would be not white and not male, so maybe that has something to do with it. Just saying. So watching this testimony was amazing too, because there was a point at which, he was saying he couldn't say things about what he had discussed with the president, right? Basically, the I don't recall and the I can't talk about that were his main answers, because he doesn't want to get nailed down to anything because he knows he's in trouble. And one of his circular logic Mobius strips that he put together was how he couldn't talk about something because the Department of Justice has had these long-standing policies not to talk about stuff that they talk about with the president because, the president needs his privacy or some such bullshit. And Senator Heinrich, Maryland, I think he's from, fantastic job of saying, look, when you don't answer questions, you're stonewalling. And when you don't answer questions, there are really only 3 legal ways not to answer questions. Number 1, the answer's classified. You can't say it. You could say it in a closed classified session. Number 2, that it's a part of some ongoing investigation, for which if you answered in an open session, you'd then compromise the investigation. But again, could take it to a closed session and answer. And number 3, the president's invoked executive privilege over that. And Senator Heinrich is like, look, you're not saying number one, it's not classified. You're not saying number two, it's an investigation. You're not saying number three, that the president has invoked executive privilege. And you yourself have said you aren't invoking executive privilege because you don't have the power to do so as Attorney General. Only the president can invoke executive privilege. So you're saying some sort of fourth, and Heinrich call it bucket four. You're saying some sort of fourth option that makes it okay for you not to answer questions under oath in front of Senate. And Jeff Bowe's like, well, it's a long-standing policy at the Department of Justice that we don't talk about such things because the president could invoke executive privilege. But he hasn't, right? Well, no. So his argument was Sessions can't talk about what he said to Trump, even though Trump hasn't invoked executive privilege over it, because doing so, talking about their conversations, would prevent Trump from invoking executive privilege in the future. Let that sink in and ruminate in your little brain pan for a second. And to think some of these senators are the same people that had an apoplectic fit over, well, it depends on what the definition of the word is. Be right back with some marijuana talk. A bonus rant after this.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson, or Norman. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cannabis Sports Medicine from the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Just say no.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I inhaled.
That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
How does one explain the tortured logic of a malevolent sling blade hobbit? I've been talking about the Attorney General of the United States, or at least for now, and demented love child of Forrest Gump and a Keebler elf, the doubly traitor named Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. This Jeff Bowe is a walking, talking 1980s just say no relic, as if we grew him from clones of Nancy Reagan's DNA found in some fossilized tree sap in Lafayette Park. This guy sees a latent heroin addict in every pot smoker and has used that debunked gateway drug talking point repeatedly. Quote, "If we go down this path, we're going to regret it," warned Sessions in a Senate hearing in April 2016. "Lives will be impacted. Families will be broken up. Children will be damaged. and people may be psychologically impacted the rest of their lives with marijuana. And if they go on to more serious drugs, which tends to happen, and deny it if you want to, but it tends to happen, there'll be even greater causes. You'll see cocaine and heroin increase, and a huge increase in marijuana-related emergency room visits, and accidents and traffic deaths related to marijuana. End quote. Well, not only do we deny the gateway theory, we respond with numerous recent studies and surveys showing that by every measure of harm from the current opiate epidemic, the deaths, the overdose, the addictions, the use, and the prescriptions is reduced significantly in the states that legalize access to marijuana for medicinal purposes. Well, science schmience. Jeff Sessions knows a gateway drug when he sees one. I see a line in the Washington Post today that I remember from the 80s. Marijuana is a cure for opiate abuse? Give me a break. This is the kind of argument that's been made out there to just almost a desperate attempt to defend the harmlessness of marijuana or even its benefits. In numerous articles, I have warned about the drug war reboot that Sessions has been foreshadowing. I often receive responses that Sessions hasn't done anything yet, and I'm just being alarmist. We're past the tipping point, I'm sometimes told, and there's no way the feds can shut down legalization. Well, I think that's true to the extent that we'll never go back to full national marijuana prohibition, but rest assured that Sessions' Department of Justice is going to use every weapon in its arsenal to make the rollout of legalization the biggest pain in our ass it can be. Exhibit A would be the stunning revelation from Tom Angel out at Massroots that Sessions personally sent a letter to the leaders of Congress asking them to strike the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment from the next year's fiscal budget. That's the writer that's currently preventing the Department of Justice and its DEA from spending any taxpayer dollars to prosecute lawfully operated medical marijuana businesses in the Western medical marijuana states that are covered by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. In the letter, Jeff Sessions writes, I believe it would be unwise for Congress to restrict the discretion of the department to fund particular prosecutions, particularly in the midst of an historic drug epidemic. End quote. So, it is clear that Sessions wants to prosecute in medical marijuana states. Should he get the green light to do so, he will. That, in turn, may lead to an increase in the opiate epidemic in the western states. Then Sessions can point and say, in all these western states with legal marijuana, they're seeing increases in opiate overdoses. It is a gateway drug. Exhibit B would be the recent seizure by Customs and Border Patrol of the locking odor-proof bags made by a Boulder company called Stash Logics. According to Customs, which is a division of Sessions' Department of Justice, remember, these bags are clearly drug paraphernalia and therefore federally illegal to import. Now, if you're thinking, wait, isn't paraphernalia something like a pipe or a bong that you smoke pot out of? Well, yeah, you're right, but that's not the entire definition. Paraphernalia also includes accoutrement for storing drugs, like your fake Pepsi can for hiding weed or a vial with a Coke spoon lid. Despite the fact that these Stash Logics bags have no pot leaf insignia or no other designation that they're for storing drugs, and they closely resemble a standard camera bag with adjustable compartments, since people do use them for storing weed, the feds consider them paraphernalia. This is from the seizure letter from the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol to Stash Logics. They wrote, standing alone, the Stash Logics storage case can be viewed as a multi-purpose storage case with no association with or to controlled substances. Yet there is no evidence in the form of marketing or community usage that would dispel the finding that Stash Logics cases have a legitimate use other than to store, carry, or conceal marijuana. End quote. The federal government actually introduced reviews from Stash Logics from cannabis-related blogs to determine that nobody would ever store, say their legal prescription pharmaceuticals, some sort of smelly food that they don't want to stink up the fridge at work with, and it's got a combo lock on it, so nobody's going to get into it. No, nobody would ever use these for any other purpose but storing weed. That's the logic, right? That's the illogic that the federal government is applying to this case. So, despite the Department of Justice's Cole memo and its demand that the states that legalize marijuana do so in a way that minimizes exposure to children, the feds are blocking the import of locking storage bags that keep marijuana out of the hands of children. And of course, that leads to a possible increase in unintentional child overdoses on marijuana, which Sessions can then point to and say legalization is harming the kids. So if you take the feds at their word that they want to protect kids and reduce opiate deaths, then going after the medical marijuana states, when we know medical marijuana helps to reduce opiate deaths, makes no sense at all. And if you really say you're wanting to protect the kids in the states that have legalized marijuana, banning the import of a bag that prevents the kids from getting into the marijuana makes no sense at all. But if you read between the lines and you recognize that the feds are itching for a drug war reboot, those two actions make perfect sense. More opiate deaths in Western marijuana states? Hey, that helps tie that gateway theory all together in a nice bow, doesn't it? More kids in these Western states getting into the marijuana edibles because parents aren't locking them up with some nice handy product to do so? That helps their case too. This is abominable, these actions by the Department of Justice, and now you might add Exhibit C to this. Rod Rosenstein testifying on Capitol Hill today about how the agency is looking at revamping the federal enforcement policies with respect to marijuana, saying that the Cole memo is the way it is now, but moving forward, we might have to reevaluate what we're doing here. Jeff Sessions directly asking the leaders of Congress to untie his hands, to do away with the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, now the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment, do away with that, end that protection, because it has to be renewed on an annual basis, end that protection for the Western medical marijuana states. Why would he want that so badly if it wasn't his plan to go after the Western medical marijuana states? Particularly, and this has got to be top in their crosshairs, the state of California. They know the state of California, if it falls, everybody else falls. They know if California succeeds and becomes the massive cannabis production state that it will become, not that it isn't already, but once 2023 rolls around, you get those mega grows going and the massive corporate farms going, marijuana prohibition is over. This is the death throes of the prohibitionists. This is the dinosaurs sinking into the tar pits time. And there's nothing more dangerous than a wounded, cornered animal. And Jeff Sessions is a wounded, cornered animal at this point. Also consider that we've got the real possibility of Jeff Sessions being ousted from that job due to his testimony today, maybe by resigning or even by prosecutions against him. Who do we get then but Rod Rosenstein? And we can see what Rosenstein thinks about our issue at this point too. And Rosenstein strikes me as someone as not being as foolhardy and boastful and verbose as someone like Jeff Sessions. Not somebody who plays his cards a little closer to the vest. We don't have decades worth of information about his hostility to marijuana. We have no idea what we might get out of a Rod Rosenstein. These issues of Russia and collusion may end up having a big impact on the cannabis industry for that very reason.
Because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Let's not forget, in Sessions' testimony today, basically lying about what Senator Franken asked him, saying that Senator Franken asked a meandering question when it was direct and to the point, and Sessions gave an answer that wasn't even an answer to the question, and that was the answer that got him in trouble. Ha! Oh, this is getting fun. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Georgia.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cultivator's Corner with Jorge Cervantes from marijuanagrowing.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Tjena, jag heter David, PKA Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a great safety meeting. And as we return, I want to talk about this report in the New York Times. This came out on the 5th. Just getting around to checking it out now, entitled The Upshot. Drug deaths in America are rising faster than ever. And from this, there are some incredible statistics. And the big tagline that's come out of this so far is how we now have in America for 2016 more drug deaths, more drug overdose deaths than we've had deaths in the Vietnam War. Think about that. More overdose deaths than deaths in the Vietnam War. In just 1 year, folks, that's more than 58,000 that we're talking about. And here's the graph from the New York Times is quite amazing as you look at this thing. To see over on the left edge of the graph, we're talking the first line that you can see, dotted line, 10,000 deaths per year. And in starting around 1980, they've got the drug overdose deaths. Man, that looks around 6,000. When you look at 1980, I'm in high school, 85. It's maybe up to 7,000. It doesn't crest past 10,000 deaths a year until 1992. Then around 1995, it's up to about 12,000 or so. And keep in mind our timeline here. 1996 is where we see the introduction of both medical marijuana, and 1993 is where we see the introduction of OxyContin, Purdue Pharmaceuticals, right? And these TV ads pumping out OxyContin, prescription opioid painkillers, marketing them as non-addictive or abuse-resistant. And from that point on, around mid-90s, the graph just takes off. We topped 20,000 by 2001. We topped 30,000 by 2005. We topped 40,000 by 2010, 50,000 in 2014, and now they're forecasting, because they have to forecast this stuff, between 59,000 to 65,000 people who've died from an overdose death in 2016. Again, more people. Vietnam was 58,000 and change. More deaths in 1 year from opiate overdose, well, drug overdose deaths. It's all drug overdose deaths, but most of this, opiate overdose deaths. And when you compare this graph to the graph of the allowable quotas for pharmaceutical manufacturing, they're quite similar. We see similar huge increases in the amount of OxyContin, the amount of Percocet, Vicodin, and now fentanyl being manufactured, being allowed to be manufactured, and the deaths now that are coming from that. And they compare this in the chart to some of the other deaths from our other epidemics. Car crashes. The peak of car crash deaths in the United States in 1972, we reached the peak, was around 54,000 a year. And that's when, Ralph Nader was getting involved, and let's put seatbelts in cars. And then we got airbags, we got safer crumple zones, yada, yada, yada. Cars are much safer now. We lowered some speed limits, although they're going up in some places. And we saved a lot of lives. We're nowhere near the 54,000 car crash deaths. The peak of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, 1995, peak number of deaths per year from HIV/AIDS, about 46,000. About 46,000. We reached that in overdose deaths about in 2014, and long since have gone past it. Most gun deaths in America, peak of that was 1993, 39,000. These prescription pharmaceuticals, and now the fentanyl and carfentanil, are killing people in America at amazing clip. Here's another chart that I found interesting from the story. These are the drug overdose deaths for 6 counties in Ohio, from left to right: Warren, Butler, Summit, Hamilton, Cuyahoga, and Montgomery counties. And you can see how back in 2010, the range was like 11 to 127. Well, 11 to 267, sorry. And now some of these counties, 800 deaths. Counties that previously had just the year before, had fewer than 400, have doubled their opiate deaths in just the last year. Fentanyl is a lot to blame for these overdose deaths. Fentanyl, 5,000 times stronger than heroin. Carfentanil, 5,000 times stronger. With carfentanil, a few grains of it can be a lethal dose. According to Captain Michael Shearer, the commander of the narcotics unit from the Akron Police Department, July 5th, 2016, that's the day carfentanil hit the streets of Akron. On that day, 17 people overdosed and 1 person died in a span of 9 hours. Over the next 6 months, the county medical examiner recorded 140 overdose deaths of people testing positive for carfentanil. And fentanyl itself is already like 100 times stronger than heroin. Carfentanil, far stronger. Now, I'm not the kind of person to say this drug is bad or this drug is good. I think drugs are neutral. Like a hammer is not good or bad. A guy who picks up a hammer could use it as a tool or use it as a weapon. But the hammer itself's not bad. Neither is carfentanil bad. There are some people in excruciating, lifelong, chronic pain for whom there is no other relief than these hyper strong opiate medications. They've built up tolerance. They have super amounts of pain. The drug itself is not the bad thing. The bad thing is the lack of transparency and regulation and guarantees of purity and access to other opiate medications, to other opiate drugs. These people who are overdosing on fentanyl and carfentanil don't want to be overdosing. They're guys that have a heroin addiction. And they're used to using this dose of heroin, and this is what does it for me. This is what I need to not be sick. But when that dose that you're expecting to be heroin contains something that's 5,000 times stronger, yeah, you're going to die. And what's happening is these illicit dealers are mixing the stuff. Like, hey, we'll have some heroin, but if we want to have people really like our stuff, we'll mix just a little bit of fentanyl in there and mix it up so it's a little more powerful, more kick. They'll be back for more. It's cheaper or whatever the excuse might be. Because there is no regulation, there is no safety, there's no purity, there's no testing, there's no oversight, there's no guarantees. And I understand that there are people in the marijuana community who will look askance at heroin, opiates, people that have those sorts of addiction issues. People in the marijuana community who will adopt that's hard drugs attitude. That's not marijuana. Marijuana is safer. And it is. No doubt about that. But we need to understand that what we're fighting for as far as marijuana legalization and our right to use marijuana, all use is none of your business, what I do with my body and my mind, that applies to all drugs. That thinking applies to all drugs. Now, drugs can be regulated more stringently based on their relative levels of harm and danger. Certainly. Certainly we can do that. We have all sorts of differing tiers of regulation when it comes to things. But an outright ban is not going to work. It's not working. It's killing people. And then to compound that by prosecuting one of the alternatives, one of the best alternatives, legal marijuana, which of course is the best form of medical marijuana because anybody can get it at any time, so long as they're 21. To fight medical marijuana or legalized marijuana in an era where we have these opiate overdoses now surpassing the deaths from the Vietnam War is really a crime against our citizenry. This is an issue that I really believe the Trump administration, and particularly Jeff Sessions, I really believe they are trying their hardest to demagogue on this issue of the opiate epidemic, to tie it to the need for more war on drugs, tough on crime, 1980s style policies. Jeff Sessions wants to reanimate the zombie corpse of the gateway drug theory to support what are really his own cultural biases against marijuana. And really, if you dig a little deeper, the people who use marijuana, if you get my drift. Entertainers and others, And it's really something I worry about when it comes to our community and not recognizing that we are just part of a larger fight for cognitive liberty, for our own personal sovereignty. And that the fact that we have the popular drug and the safe one doesn't absolve us from standing up for others. I go by that, Niemöller poem. First they came for the trade unionists, but I wasn't a trade unionist. And they came for the Catholics. I wasn't a Catholic, right? You got to stand up. And we've got to stand up for people who are the least of us. The people who will have the least support. The people who don't have Heroin Fest to raise money for them. The people who don't have, Meth Times magazine pointing out their plight or helping them get any, celebrity coverage. Everyone deserves the right to do with their mind and body what they so choose, even if doing what they so choose is a really bad idea. Just like free speech, man. If we don't defend the most offensive speech, then we really don't have free speech. If we don't defend the most stupid choices, we really don't have freedom or sovereignty in our bodies. Again, so long as we harm no others. I believe every man and woman has the freedom to harm themselves any way they like. Your body, man. Do with it what you like. But unfortunately, there's just not as many people in our government, our leadership, and in our voting booths who feel the same way I do. I hope you do. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the new figures on self-admittance to marijuana rehab. Also, my home state of Oregon defending legalized marijuana against the feds when we return.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
And now, another episode of Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre. I'm your host, Leonard Pinth-Garnell III. Tonight we take a look at one of the finest works in the cannabis cinema, 1996's Half-Baked, starring David Chappelle, as interpreted by the Royal Shakespearean Cannabis Theatre Company. In this scene, Chappelle's character, Thurgood Marshall, has just admitted his addiction to cannabis to a room full of narcotics addicts. One addict, played in the film by Robert Saget and interpreted here by the Royal Company's Sir Frederick Farrach, takes umbrage at the suggestion.
I find preposterous the notion that you, sir, may be addicted to cannabis. In times previous, I have undertaken lubricious endeavours, most revolting and unbecoming of a proper gentleman, in my servitude to the wicked powder of the coca leaf. Lo, that is an addiction whose chains would bind Hercules. At any point in history, could one identify a moment in your life so sullied by your ignominy as a cannabis slave? Methinks not! Boo this man!
For Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre, I'm Leonard Pinth-Garnell III.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the conservative agenda, minus the hypocrisy.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Freedom Leaf Preview with Steve Bloom from Freedom Leaf Magazine. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a Radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Farrach has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Sounds like a skunk. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you here. And quick note about the new site, mjagenda.com. You can get free audio replays of the Cannabis Headline News. Those are available every day. The top 5 stories in 5 minutes with the Cannabis Headline News. You can also get your subscription to Hour 1 of our podcast, The Marijuana Agenda, for just $4.20 a month, just $4.20 for over 20 hours of the latest marijuana content, news, data analysis, interviews, and rants. Help me keep this thing on the air. And VIP subscriptions available, $9.99 a month. Those VIP subscriptions get you both hours of the show as a podcast, over 40 hours of the newest information, news, opinion, analysis, rants, and interviews. Also, you get ad-free downloads of the first hour segment. So like if you like just the Radical Rant, or you like just the Students for Sensible Drug Policy, you just want that MP3 maybe passed around to your friends or whatever, bam, VIP subscription, $9.99. You get it from the beginning to the end, no ads in between. It's a wonderful way to listen to your favorite segments. Also, a great way to do research on previous shows and get interviews you may have missed. So the VIP subscription, $9.99, also includes special bonus downloads. I'll put up like maps and graphs and charts and data tables, stuff you can't get anywhere else. Stuff I've been working on for over a decade now, collecting data from various federal and state surveys. You can have it all, just $9.99 a month. Are you kidding me? Also, sponsorship opportunities available starting at $19.99 a month. And sponsors get some of these wonderful ads that you hear and also other benefits. Check it all out at mjagenda.com. And my thanks to the 21 subscribing sponsors or subscribing supporters who've already joined at mjagenda.com in our first week of relaunch. Thank you very much. We're working up towards the goals. Our first goal, $420 a month. $420 a month will allow me to break even on this. And I got to make that. If I don't make that $420 a month by the end of the year, the puppy gets it. That's right. I'm going to shoot a puppy on New Year's Eve if I don't get up to... I'm just kidding. I'm not going to shoot. I was thinking of the old National Lampoon cover, Buy This Magazine, or The Dog Gets It. I'm not going to shoot a puppy. Russ Belville's an awful person. He smokes marijuana and shoots puppies. Okay, just kidding. Also, make sure you follow us out on social media at MJ Agenda Show on Twitter, MJ Agenda Show, because if you follow at MJ Agenda, you're following Mustafa Jagenda. Mustafa Jagenda is a real human being. He's got my MJ Agenda handle. So MJ Agenda Show on Twitter, MJ Agenda on Facebook. Thanks so much for supporting. And also today, I've started posting links to the articles I write on MJ Agenda, kind of as a blog, and this is free, right? So you'll get like the first 3 paragraphs and then a link to where you can read more. So all my High Time stuff, all my Green State stuff, Huffington Post, Alternate, yada, all these things, wherever I write them, I will post a link at the MJ Agenda site. So please sign up today. Now, I did get word back from some subscribers who are vexed as to the new RSS feed. The way it works is once you subscribe for $4.20 or $9.99, you'll get an email with a link, and that's your RSS link. So like in iTunes, you have to manually add it. You can't go to like the iTunes store and search for podcast and find it. You have to manually add this private link because it's your private subscription. In iTunes, you do it through, if you have the old iTunes before version 11, you do it through the advanced menu, like advanced, subscribe to podcast. In the new one, the newer version of iTunes, it's file, subscribe to podcast. Now, here's my problem, folks, and maybe someone in the chat room can help me. I just know how to do it, iTunes through the desktop app. I don't have an iPhone. And one of my listeners was noting, I shouldn't say complaining, just noting, that he couldn't get it to work with iTunes on the iPhone. So if there's an iPhone listener out there who knows how to punch in that private subscription link to make it work from the phone, that would be a big help to me. You could just email me that, radicalruss@gmail.com. I'd really appreciate it. All right, I want to get to some data that I found interesting. And this comes from the Washington Post. The title of it, and this came out yesterday, more people are voluntarily seeking help for marijuana addiction. So it's interesting because they're taking a look at 2 figures, which is first from the treatment episode data set, TEDS, right? Treatment episode data set is the survey information of people who are checked in to rehabs that receive federal money in some degree or another, either 100% or just partial or whatever. Part of the law to get that federal money, you got to report to this TEDS database. So it's not all rehabs. In fact, it's about like 58% of the rehabs in America. So some of these bigger private, big name, Betty Ford or something like that. And I'm just saying Betty Ford as an example. I don't know that she's one of them or it's one of them. But the private rehabs don't have to report, but some of them do. The only ones that are mandated, about 58% of the rehabs do report. And so from their numbers, they found a decrease in the people who are seeking marijuana rehab because courts forced them to. So it's a 40% reduction from 2011 to 2015, a decrease in 40% in the people that courts forced into rehab because of their marijuana use. Now, that, of course, has a lot to do with marijuana becoming legal, either medically or recreationally, because now you're getting caught with it doesn't mean it going to a jail and doesn't mean going to a court and being forced to have to go to rehab. So that's to be expected. We're going to have fewer of these court-ordered rehabs. And keep in mind, court-ordered rehabs make up about half of the people that go to rehab for marijuana up until these most recent years that we've been looking at data. But now this report is showing that we are somewhat seeing an increase in the people that are voluntarily checking themselves into rehab. Now, this is somewhat offsetting that decrease in the court-ordered rehab people. So the balance is shifting from less court-ordered rehabbers to more self-admitted rehabbers, people that are voluntarily checking in. And I think this is fine. This is good news. There's too many people on our side who kind of paint themselves into this corner of marijuana is safer and it's so harmless and it's negligible that it could do any harm. They paint themselves into this corner because it is documented that there are people who develop from time to time a problem with their cannabis use. There can be dependency. There can be people with problematic use. But obviously there can be dependency on anything. There's people dependent on video games, on surfing the internet, on shopping, on sex, on porn. There's all sorts of dependencies out there. But unlike marijuana, with the rest of those dependencies, it's not illegal to admit you got that problem, right? I think that has a lot to do with the increase in people seeking treatment for marijuana. People who may have fudged a little bit about what they were going in for. Maybe it was say it was alcohol when it was really pot. Maybe people that are just not going to rehab at all and trying to tough it out because they know admitting that they're going into rehab for pot could get them in trouble with their school or their employer. But once you make it legal, people that do legitimately have a problem have the ability and the leeway to be able to admit it and know that they're not admitting to some sort of crime that's going to cost them their freedom, cost them their kids, their job, their student loan. This is why I always caution people when we talk about marijuana statistics and trends, it's a little disingenuous to compare stats you had when it was completely illegal versus stats you have as you're making it legal. It's different eras, right? It's like trying to compare teams before the three-point line to after the three-point line in professional basketball. Before the three-point line, if you were a player who couldn't hit a three-pointer, you were not necessarily a liability. Now you are. If you can't hit from outside, you're a liability, and it changes the makeup of the teams and the play of the game. The same thing goes for our statistics when it comes to marijuana pre- and post-prohibition. For example, they'll talk about, since legalization, we've seen a massive increase in the number of people reporting to poison control centers that they've ingested marijuana. No, you've seen the massive increase in the reporting of it, but not necessarily that it's happening more often. Because people now can be honest about why they're going to the poison control center or the ER. I'll bet if you look at the figures for the numbers of reports of, I don't know, maybe it was food poisoning. Maybe, it was those clams I had the other day. That's why I'm so sick. I'll bet those claims have gone down. Now people don't have to lie. They don't have to make up excuses when their kid or their dog or themselves gets too high from getting into the stash. That's why those numbers go up. Same thing when you look at the stats about stoned driving. Oh, the cops are catching more stoned drivers these days. No, the cops are looking to catch more stoned drivers these days and therefore catching them. And whether or not people were driving stoned or not driving stoned is, again, something that's kind of hard to evaluate in a prohibition world versus a non-prohibition world. This is something I caution our side about a bit. You know, I often have this saying that, you know, legalization doesn't invent cars and weed, but legalization does remove a strong incentive not to be high behind the wheel or to have weed on you behind the wheel. If the difference now is if I'm driving and I've got weed behind the wheel and I'm smoking a joint while I'm driving and getting caught with that, and the smell of that means I can be searched immediately, that tempers my behavior. In a legal world where I could be smoking a joint behind the wheel, but the smell of marijuana in and of itself is not a probable cause for a search that there's any contraband on me, that maybe relaxes my attitude a bit. This is something we need to be honest about. I think our side's going to get caught and lose some credibility with the public if we're not honest about the fact that, A, lots of us smoke and drive. I'm telling you, folks, I know a lot of stoners. Lots of us smoke and drive. And the reason we do is because there's not a problem with it. We know there's no issue with it. We've been with people behind the wheel who are driving, and we've been the people behind the wheel driving, and we're not wrecking, we're not dying, we're not causing massive pileups on the freeway. We know the fear about this is largely bullshit. We need to be honest about that. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll close things up with a little talk about, speaking of basketball, Dennis Rodman.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
And now, another episode of Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre. I'm your host, Leonard Pinth-Garnell III. Tonight, we revisit a classic of the cannabis cinema, 1977's Animal House. While not known as a cannabis movie per se, this scene, reenacted by the Royal Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre Company, features a cannabis-smoking professor, played by Donald Sutherland, sharing a joint with his student, Pinto, played by Thomas Holtz, while exploring the nature of the universe. Enjoy.
Verily, it appears as if the entirety of the heavens could be as one minuscule atom in the fingernail of a heretofore unknown colossus. Marvel upon marvel. So, logically, one minuscule atom in mine own fingernail could contain a microscopic entirety of the heavens. Oh, wouldst thou entertain my purchase of cannabis?
For Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre, I'm Leonard Pinth-Garnell III.
The Marijuana Agenda. Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaolin Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dogs.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Our Government at Work, the latest in cannabis reform at the local, state, federal, and international level. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, you know, because they've got a town called Argusville. Arr. What are you smoking there, boy? It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, as we wind things up here, I want to make a shout out to our state here, the state of Oregon, which in a report from Oregon Live says Oregon defends legal marijuana market to the feds. And the background on this is here in Oregon, our local beat reporter, Noelle Crombie, and the folks there at the Oregonian, the state's largest newspaper, uncovered this report. It was a draft version of this report by the Oregon State Police. And I'll just summarize it. It basically said, oh my God, they grow a fuck ton of marijuana in Oregon and it's going everywhere. That's basically the part of the report. And so Of course, the Trump administration and Jeff Sessions and everybody seized on this. Rocky Mountain high-intensity drug trafficking people, Project Sam. They said, see, Oregon's got medical, Oregon's got legalization. They're going a fuck ton of weed in Oregon, and it's going everywhere. And, oh, my God, we can't stop the Oregon weed. So this is the background, right? So this report came out, and so now officials from the U.S. Attorney's Office, this is Billy Williams, is the U.S. Attorney for Oregon, requested a meeting with top aides from the office of Governor Kate Brown to discuss this report about Oregon being a top supplier state for marijuana. Now, it should be noted, Oregon has always been a top supplier state for marijuana. 6 counties in southern Oregon probably produce more marijuana than the entire Midwest, right? And probably only second. I think the southern Oregon counties are probably only second behind the Emerald Triangle counties of Trinity, Mendocino, and Humboldt as far as their production of marijuana, right? It's like that little sweet spot north of San Francisco, south of Eugene, Oregon. That sweet spot is the cannabis growing capital of the world. So it's not medical, it's not legalization, it's none of the reforms or changes in our laws made this the case. It's always been that way. So the U.S. Attorney won this meeting, and at the meeting was the Oregon State Police Superintendent, Travis Hampton, the Oregon Liquor Control Commission Executive Director, and a representative from the Oregon Attorney General's office. And according to the report here in Oregon Live, they responded by talking about Oregon's seed-to-sale tracking system, the security and testing requirements, and the tax revenue and jobs, $60 million in tax revenue from legal cannabis here in Oregon, and 12,000 jobs from tax revenue, or 12,000 jobs from legal marijuana in Oregon. So thank you for standing up for that. But it also notes how our state, because of these pressures, because of this election of the Sling Blade Hobbit, Keebler Elf, Forrest Gump clone, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, because of this fella and the Trump administration, because we didn't get a continuation of the Obama administration's laissez-faire policies with respect to state legalization, because some people didn't vote, some people didn't know that we're a two-party system. Because of that, here in Oregon, where our legislators have been very accepting of our marijuana, because of these threats, they're starting to ratchet back our system. They're capping our immature marijuana plants. Now, we've had this mature marijuana plant thing for a long time. When we first started, you could have 3 mature plants, 4 immature plants. And a lot of cannabis patients went, that's ridiculous. We got to make oil. We got to make FECO. We can't get by on just that little amount. We got it increased to 6 mature plants, 18 immature plants. 18 immature plants. And this whole time, immature plants then got defined as less than 12 inches tall, less than 12 inches around. Because, once a plant's taller than 12 inches, it's mature, right? Just like when a teenage girl is over 5 foot tall, now she's sexually mature, right? She's of age of consent because she's over 5 foot tall. No! Pot plants are mature when they have buds. That's what makes a mature plant. But no, they limited us to 18 that are under 12 inches. And then, as we got legalization and as we started making more reforms, we finally got rid of that immature plant designation because we realized, who gives a shit how many immature plants you have? Immature plants aren't good for anything other than eventually becoming mature plants, which you've already got a limit on. Hell, I can have 1 billion immature plants, but if my limit is 6 mature ones, what good are my 1 billion immature ones? So we'd finally gotten rid of that rule, but now they're revamping it again to deal with these threats from the Trump administration to make it 12 immature plants. We're going to go back to fewer immature plants than we had before, when it was 18. There's a whole bunch more, but I've run out of time. And hey, Dennis Rodman's on his way because Potcoin is sending him to North Korea. I don't know what Potcoin is. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
For everyone here at Delta 9 House and Studios, I'm Russ Belville. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with more news and views you can use for the cannabis community. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.